You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay, everyone. How was your long weekend? Or I don't know if that was a long weekend for some people. Holiday for the Americans. 4th of July. Did you have fun? I had a great little break, and I'm back to talk about Amanda Knox versus Hollywood. Now, in 2021, Matt Damon was in a movie called Stillwater, which was very loosely based on the murder of Meredith Kercher. Matt Damon plays a dad who wants to get his daughter out of French prison for murdering her lesbian lover. That's my understanding. And what I've been told is that at the end, you find out that she really did it. So obviously, this bothered Amanda. Now, to refresh, Amanda Knox was let go by the Supreme Court of Italy after they threw out all the DNA evidence. And there was a lot of pressure on America to do this. And just to give you an idea of some of the news stories that we saw at the time, here's one. Amanda Knox update. Hillary Clinton will meet with those, quote, concerned, unquote, about case. There's another. This is about Hillary Clinton will meet with a supporter of Amanda Knox who was a senator. And then finally, after it was all over, Amanda Knox monitored by State Department from the start. So that comes into play. So I have 2 interviews. So not only did Amanda Knox react very badly to this Stillwater fictional that was loosely based on her story and was completely fictional, I think her real beef with it was because the film said she was guilty. Now, she has no problem with any of the media that comes out and says she's innocent. In fact, her dad hired a PR firm, Gagardi Marriott, before he ever hired a lawyer. And for $1 million, and they propagandized the heck out of the American media. She had no problems with that. She didn't feel like she lacked context. They gave her all the context she needed, but Stillwater, it's another story. So I just want to play this interview she gave at the, not only did she wrote an article in the Atlantic about it, and she gave many, many interviews about how terrible this was. This was like the worst thing that ever happened to her. I don't know if she said that, but she made it seem like it was that she could never get out from under this image that she had been involved with the murder of Meredith Kercher. And that's exactly what the Supreme Court said. They said when they let her go, they said that there were multiple attackers. Amanda Knox was there at the scene of the crime, and that she washed Meredith Kercher's blood off her hands, and that the break-in room was staged, which is hugely important because the only people who would stage a break-in were people who obviously lived there and had to make it look like someone broke in, because otherwise you have to say, well, I let in Rudy Gude, but I left, I guess would be the thing, even when and we know that she had a relationship with Rudy Gude. She knew him. Relationship, I mean, by that I mean she knew him. So let's get into this BBC interview.
Safety of this like veil of fictionalization, while at the same time being able to exploit real people's stories and point to those real people's stories in order to sell their product. But they didn't bother to even reach out to me to talk about the Amanda Knox character in their film. And I think that was because a lot of people think of me not really as a human being, but as an idea of a person, as like a tabloid entity that they can sort of constantly refer back.
So they didn't reach out to me so I could tell them that I was innocent. That's very important to Amanda, that everybody thinks that she is innocent. And you'll see that theme come up again and again in her interviews. It's not so much that she wants to prove it, like go to court and sue for your wrongful conviction, which Raph did. Very late, by the way. I think just recently he got turned down within the last couple of years. He got nothing because she knows that she was treated fairly and that she should be lucky that she got her conviction overturned basically on a technicality, not enough evidence. Under paragraph 530, paragraph 2, which is like lack of evidence, not proven, instead of paragraph 1 in section 530, which is innocence, real innocence. But Amanda will claim again and again in this interview that this is a case of real innocence.
Too, without actually engaging with as a real human being.
How do you deal with that? Because you are obviously a real person.
I have found it to be incredibly, incredibly difficult to be a definitive voice in my own life because...
What does that mean, to be a definitive voice in your own life? So does that mean, I mean, I've really been thinking about that line. So does that mean when I talk, people don't believe me? When I tell people what happened, my reputation for lying comes so far before me that no one believes me when I say that I took no part in this? Is that what she means? Or does she mean something else? That's such a weird way to say it.
I sort of started at a disadvantage. I was 4 years in prison with tons of people writing and authoring my experience and saying who I was as a human being. So I came into the free world without really having a grasp over my own identity and over my...
What about that PR firm? Where do we get all these stories about how you were beloved sister, beloved daughter, just over there studying, being studious, and, you know, basically the world's greatest person. That's what we heard in America, at least, while this case was being litigated in Italy. Apparently that's a non-entity now.
Over my own reality, even like the fact that like I was convicted for a crime that I didn't commit truly, truly, truly imprinted upon me the fact that sometimes the truth doesn't matter. Sometimes
the truth doesn't matter. And there you get that I was convicted for a crime I didn't commit. They spit that out. That is basically all these people who get their conviction overturned and get into this, what I'd call the innocence fraud grift, say the same thing. I was convicted for a crime I didn't commit, over and over, that same delivery. Unreal.
Sometimes the story is the thing that matters and what people really grasp onto, and the consequences, real human lives, are lost.
Yeah, sometimes the story, like the story that's told by this multi-billion-dollar innocence movement that backed you, the media in America pretty much uniformly backed you. The only people you didn't convince were the UK press and the Italian press. And you can see she has an issue with those two entities
in the process.
But this is your life, and it's been 14 years since Meredith was murdered, 10 years since you were cleared. of the crime. You're now 34, married, recently had a baby. But in some ways, you're still stuck back in 2007. And it's like you're not allowed to move on, not just by Hollywood, but by associations that people hold with your name.
Yes. It's the biggest challenge.
What is stopping her from doing something else, from getting a degree, from taking on another profession, becoming something else, becoming a chef? I don't think like chef, whatever, Amanda Knox is going to get so much attention. But because she gives interviews over and over again, time and time again about this, ever heard of the Streisand effect, Amanda Knox? Apparently not. So you probably would have made a better impression not saying anything about this movie than coming out. But anytime there's an opportunity for her to get in the limelight, she will do it and then complain about it.
Of my life, because it's still this sort of perpetually trying to prove my innocence, and also trying to prove that I'm not the human being that people have constantly taken me for. And I've struggled with this. I've struggled with whether or not this is a winning battle, like if there is a way to win. I still don't know to this day if I'm ever going to do anything.
There is a way to win. You could have proved your innocence in court, but that never happened. The best you got with all the political pressure, the best they could do was throw out all the DNA evidence. Not against Rudy Gude. That still matters in his case. But you and Raph, that's how they got you out. You should be so lucky. And you're complaining about that? You're complaining because you got convicted basically twice. You got convicted once and it got reaffirmed by the appeals court. And then when you finally got it overturned, it was such a damning decision to you. So yeah, the people that know something about it, I would argue they're in the minority. But I think what you're responding to is the vast majority of people that I talk to who don't know much about the case, but just see an interview like this that's called your Amanda Knox's survivor's guilt. And they don't see any survivor's guilt. They don't see any guilt at all, which you could argue if you're a Amanda Knox supporter, well, that's because she's innocent, right? But no feeling at all. And that's what sort of causes that weird disconnect in people. Like, I know I'm supposed to think she's innocent, but this doesn't seem right. This doesn't feel right, especially women. Does that mean she's guilty? No. Is that evidence of her guilt? No. I'm just answering why Amanda feels like she still has to convince people of her innocence even after this immense PR campaign on her behalf.
In my own life, myself, that's going to define me as much as the accusation of something that I didn't do.
People will recognize you. You haven't changed the way you look. You could have done all sorts of things that you've chosen not to do.
It's kind of the same reason why I never pled guilty to a crime that I didn't commit. I didn't do it, and it's not fair. And so I'm sort of.
So she's saying she's always maintained her innocence, guys. Did you hear that? Amanda Knox has always maintained her innocence, except when she was putting herself at the scene of the crime and falsely accusing her boss. But once again, that's everybody else's fault. That's the police's fault. That's the prosecutor's fault that she accused Patrick Lumumba, the boss who was really kind to her, of committing this crime, and then let him sit in prison for 2 weeks, not saying anything to anyone after she already told her mom she knew that he wasn't involved in this. She just let him sit, had meetings with her lawyers, never thought to bring it up. It's a wonder that people don't like you, Amanda. And being liked isn't the be all and end all, but she's the one complaining about it.
I'm a little bit stubborn in the sense of like, there's nothing wrong with my name and there's nothing wrong with my face. And what happened is not my fault. So I'm not going to be the one to willingly bear the costs of this misinformation campaign.
I just wanted to find out if you still ever try and convince people.
So I don't engage with it because I feel like it's a losing battle. If you've consumed a tabloid story about me and you want to engage with me on a tabloid level.
Want to engage with her on a tabloid level. She just said in the beginning of this interview, the problem was that people didn't engage with her, that the filmmakers didn't come to her and didn't want to get to know her. Now, when she has to convince people of her innocence, she claims she doesn't engage. And the people I've talked to online have talked to an awful lot of sus, had debates with an awful lot of sus people. Like, for example, Shayna, who had a whole debate with someone who kept asking on Reddit, but you don't know what happened, meaning you don't know exactly how each person moved, who did what among this group murder, exactly how this went down over and over again. And finally, Shayna said, okay, Amanda. And then it was deleted. So, and I've heard from other people as well that Amanda's out there arguing all over the internet. So I don't know. Your reputation is that is a little different, Amanda, but okay. But how are people supposed to? So strangers are supposed to come to her for context? How are they supposed to get in touch with her? And P.S. her now husband came into my Twitter feed and started arguing with me about Amanda's involvement in Meredith Kercher's murder. And when I mentioned Philomena's room and the mixed DNA that lights up under luminol, meaning luminol is a chemical that detects blood, meaning the mixed blood of Meredith and Amanda in the stage break-in room, he blocked me. And that's pretty much the same thing with all of Amanda Knox supporters. They don't like to talk about Philomena's room or the stage break-in or why it's staged. They just say it's ridiculous and show a bunch of pro-Amanda propaganda that it can be done that wouldn't hold up in court.
Level, there's no conversation to be had. I found that is one in which someone has already made up their mind about me. And no matter what I do, it's always going to be seen through a guilty lens. I'm still someone who has been deeply traumatized by this experience. I think that my relationship, obviously, with the Italian media and the British media is...
See, that's her problem. Her problem is with anyone who knows the facts of this case and concludes that she's guilty. That's her problem. If Stillwater was a ringing endorsement of her innocence, she'd love it. She would be saying, thank heavens that wrongful convictions, my wrongful conviction, she loves to call it that, my wrongful conviction is finally out in the media.
Frustrating. Their job was to hold the authorities accountable to the truth. And instead of holding the authorities accountable to the truth and to the evidence, they latched on to any and all salacious misinformation to sell a product to people instead of sharing real information that was in the public interest.
So how dare they report on my trial? Their job was to, at the time of my trial, not report on the evidence, object to the evidence because of their, and insert their own opinions into it. How dare they? I mean, wouldn't it be the other way? Wouldn't you object to people asserting their own opinions either way and just, wouldn't you want a factual record of your trial? Not Amanda. It's too damning. It's all too damning.
I could have stopped talking about this long ago if the people who were responsible for how this entire case spiraled out of control were accountable to the truth.
It's also journalists' duty to cover what they can get their hands on, and also...
See, I would have moved on with my life, but once again, it's someone else's fault. See, everything Amanda does is perfect. It's everyone else's fault. She never, ever admits any fault in anything. it's the journalist's fault. They're making me talk about it. If there weren't these articles out there putting in the damning evidence of my guilt, like, for example, the mixed DNA in Philomena's room, like, for example, the mixed DNA in the bathroom, like, for example, the mixed DNA in the hallway of me and Meredith, my footprints in the hallway, Raph's DNA on Meredith's bra clasp, her bra, which, by the way, was cut off after she was deceased. Kind of makes it look like you helped stage the murder scene, Amanda. And we're involved in a cleanup. Your lamp in Meredith Kircher's room. But those are just haters, guys. We're just haters. We're just haters. We're just jealous. We're just so jealous. Because we can't be Amanda. She's better than us in every way, especially looks.
So here we had a British girl, a British woman who was murdered, and you were put in the frame, as was your then boyfriend. And that in itself, regardless of how, I suppose, tabloids function and media operations, was a story so many people wanted anything they could get their hands on.
If we just want a story so bad because it has all these elements that make it just, like perfectly salacious, that we just can't like help ourselves to get like to treat it like, guilty candy, like this is at the expense of Meredith's family and my family and Raffaele's family.
What about your book, Amanda, that you sold for $4 million? Apparently ghostwritten. That's the allegedly ghostwritten. That's the rumor. What about your book? How did that affect Meredith's family? How about you giving this interview still? How does that affect Meredith's family? You never listened to any of their wishes to stay away from her grave, to not talk about it, to not do these media appearances, to not bring up their name. And now she's presenting it like she's the Kircher's advocate and her family advocate. It doesn't have to do with her personally that she does not like to be called a murderess or involved in a murder or cover-upper at minimum.
And the people who are most directly traumatized by the experience.
One of the things that has bothered you the most, it seems, about those trials and the way it was covered was the misdirected focus on your sexuality. And you say you keep talking about this because you don't think it has changed.
Yeah, so if we think about the way that this case ultimately was portrayed, it was never about the men. There were two men who were accused in this case, and they became irrelevant very quickly, despite the fact that
I don't know about that. They've all done media interviews. Granted, you've done the most, but they didn't have a PR agency either, Amanda. You kind of elevated yourself, but you're also American. You put yourself out there and then complain. And yes, the Kircher family think you're guilty. They attended the trial. They know. They're familiar with the facts.
One of them had an insane amount of evidence against him of having sexually assaulted and violently murdered Meredith. He disappeared.
Yeah, but your insane evidence doesn't matter. Rudy Gude disappeared because when he was in prison, he didn't give many interviews. You wrote a book. You profited off of this. I just think she's mad because someone else is profiting off of her crime.
What happened was it became a morality tale about female sexuality. Meredith was pitched as this puritanical, virginous Madonna character, and I was portrayed as this sexually obsessed, lustful, uninhibited whore. And ultimately, the reason why people so latched onto this case was because they were judging female sexuality through us. They were judging female sexuality, or were they just saying,
Because was it brought up as a way to explain the background where you were at? Even you said you were on a journey of sexual, what was it? Sexual exploration? So you admit it yourself, but now it's terrible if anybody else brings it up. Don't bring it up. Don't bring it up that I was sleeping around a lot. And when we bring it up, those of us on this side of the fence, we bring it up as a way to counter the narrative that everything was A-okay with you. You seem to be. And how you got involved with so many men and met up with Rudy Gude and Raph. Yeah, it's a background of the story, unfortunately. Sorry to judge you, but you're you're a convicted murderer.
Making sort of Meredith into this perfectly invisible ideal victim to never name again. And it's fascinating to me the number of times that Foxy Noxy was in the headline, but Meredith's name was not. Idea of a sexually deviant, like violent woman was enough to get people so riled up that they didn't care about the truth anymore. And that is
who didn't care about the truth? It seems like your side didn't care about the truth, putting out things like Rudy Gude's sperm was found at the scene. You're still doing it. You're still putting out misinformation. I mean, talk about the kettle. I mean, just like unbelievable. Unreal. And you notice how long she spends on, I don't like being called I don't like my sexuality or my past sexual history talked about. But wouldn't you, if you were falsely convicted of a murder, wouldn't you never stop talking about how you were falsely convicted in detail, in specifics, exactly what they got wrong? Tell me what they got wrong, Amanda. What exactly did they get wrong? I would be going through that case, pulling out the anomalies and the inconsistencies and how I was, quote, exonerated, unquote, of this crime. But her exoneration is so damning. There at the scene, washed Meredith Kircher's blood off her hands. Some exoneration, Amanda.
Insane problem. And that is something that I don't think has really, really been addressed. How like justice was thwarted because of our obsession with female deviancy and female sexuality.
If a case like this happened today, 14 years on, do you think it would be any different? Has it got any better?
I would hope that people would be more skeptical about that portrayal of events today. That said, I do think.
Yeah, like how Rudy Gude, I would like people to be more skeptical. How Rudy Gude killed Meredith with 2 knives. How he scaled the wall without leaving any mud on the wall. It was a muddy day, or any impressions in the grass. How he didn't leave any trace of himself in Philomena's room, the room he supposedly broke into. And yet there's your DNA mixed with Meredith Kircher's DNA. There's your blood mixed with Meredith Kircher's blood. That's what the luminol tells us. I'd like people to be more skeptical too. But she never says that. She'd like them to be more skeptical. Yeah, of your PR, I'd like them to be more skeptical. All right, back to this.
That social media was already quite active at the time of my case and had a huge impact in how the case played out. And if anything, it has become even more about tribalism, which is also a big problem that happened in my case, where like people vehemently stood for one side or the other and were unable. Again, there was that sense of confirmation bias. You see what you want to see.
I know that you've talked also about what was often called for so long the Lewinsky scandal, the Lewinsky affair, and your point about how you frame things. Why is it not called the Clinton scandal, the Clinton affair? But have you met Monica Lewinsky? Have you talked about trying to own your own name?
I have met her, and she has given me a lot of like thoughtful advice about processing this human experience, especially the experience of people not allowing you to be who you are. You are the idea of them, and you stand in as a kind of a cultural scapegoat for their ideas about women. One thing that
So she's saying it was a witch hunt, and she's glommed on to Monica Lewinsky scandal with Bill Clinton and said it was just like that. But it's just all these innocence fraud campaigns, in my opinion, I'll call it that because that's my opinion of this, always attach themselves to a cause. So she's saying, because otherwise you're like, wow, she got convicted twice, and then when she was finally let go, her exoneration is so damning. These are for the people that know anything about her case, right? She wants people to think, well, yeah, because they all just saw me as a she-devil, a dangerous sexual woman. They couldn't deal with it. It was puritanical values. Isn't Italy supposed to be extremely the opposite? I understand them doing that in America, but isn't Italy supposed to be more sexually free? Am I wrong?
has given me sort of hope is how she has been going out now to speak about her story and to speak about it from her perspective. But at the same time, she's still in conversation with that scandalous period of her life. And it's like, before she's allowed to exist and do anything else, she has to engage with that story, which is another way of sort of removing her agency.
You've said throughout this conversation that your name has been disproportionately focused on. But for instance, that Netflix documentary that you took part in was called Amanda Knox, for example. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not saying, yeah. I mean, you can tell me if you had any say over the name of it, not, for instance, the murder of Meredith Kercher.
So I can say that I didn't have any editorial control. I was not a producer on that film. I was just interviewed like everyone else. And
come on, guys. It's someone else's fault. It's the filmmakers. It's my fans. My fan filmmakers who made the Amanda Knox love letter documentary to me. It was their idea, guys. Their idea. Well, what about your book, Amanda? Waiting to be Heard. It's not Meredith Kercher's, my involvement or my exoneration of Meredith Kercher's murder. It's Amanda Knox waiting to be heard. Right? How often did you bring up Meredith Kercher in that? And how flattering was your portrayal? Not very.
I didn't have a say over whether or not it was named Amanda Knox. I think the thing that the filmmakers very intelligently did in that film is they pointed out how the case came to be about me in this very strange way.
The question also that came up at the time from Meredith's sister, Stephanie, who made a statement on behalf of the family. She wondered why you were still choosing to relive this nightmare. And some people watching this interview may also wonder why.
Well, I think in part because I don't think the truth has honestly ever been acknowledged. I know that for me, there's a sense of there not being closure in this case. And I think that I'm trying to point out the fact.
Oh, there's no closure. She's just helping everybody get closure, guys. And you notice that she didn't have a problem with the documentary because what the documentary pointed out was how it all became about me in a weird sort of way. Wonder how that happened. Really, the real reason in my opinion, that she doesn't have a problem with the documentary is because it just repeats her PR. Stillwater concludes that she's guilty, so she's got a big problem with it, of course.
That the reason why there is a sense of not closure is because the truth was never the most important thing in this case.
I am very aware this week is the anniversary, 14 years since Meredith Kercher was murdered. How do you think of her? I don't know if you do anything to mark it, or what do you think about when you think of Meredith?
Oh my. I mean, this year, it's funny.
Oh my. Oh my. What an actress, right? Oh my. In past years, I'd like to taunt the Kircher family with the idea that I would go to Meredith's grave, taunt them endlessly, and harass them and harangue them and give interviews and put my face out there and lie about my involvement. But this year, let's see what she's going to do this year.
All of the years leading up to this, I have always, whenever I've thought about this day and this day of like remembrance, I've always put myself in Meredith's shoes. And even just the fact that if I had been there that night, I could have been murdered as well. And I'm sort of haunted by this like survivor's guilt kind of thing, where like, if I.
She's not haunted by the guilt of falsely accusing Patrick Lumumba of this crime, is she? When's she going to bring that up? That doesn't haunt her. Doesn't haunt her. She hasn't paid any of the money she owes him. Now I hear it's $100,000 with interest. Hasn't paid that off, even though she got $4 million for her book. That would be a good way to celebrate. Remember Meredith Kircher's life. How about paying off Patrick Lumumba?
Had been there, we would have been able to fight him off together, or maybe we'd both be dead. I don't know. If it had been me and I had died and then she was wrongly accused, like those sort of thoughts go through my mind, and I keep thinking, wow, like a horrible thing happened to me that usually happens to men, usually happens to disenfranchised men. I'm a young woman. I don't.
Disenfranchised men like Patrick Lumumba, like the man you falsely accused of murder? Is that the kind of man who might be disenfranchised, who might spend, say, 2 weeks in prison due to your false accusation? And by the way, that false accusation where you said, I was there, I heard Meredith scream. Somehow you knew Meredith screamed right before she died. How'd you know that, Amanda? Along with a whole host of things. How she was positioned in the room, how she was murdered. The police just told people it was an accident. But you knew she had been stabbed to death. You knew it was a slow and painful death. You knew all those things. How?
Young women don't often get wrongly accused. It's more often that a young woman is going to be raped and murdered. And so I think about that and how countless women before her have suffered that fate. But this year, I've been thinking about Meredith's mom. It's the first year that I've put myself in Meredith's mom's shoes. And I'm thinking about that for my own daughter. How I want the world to be a better place for her than it was for me, and that it was for Meredith.
Thank you very much, Amanda Knox.
So how does she think she's making the world a better place, giving these interviews? I guess her supporters would say she's educating people on wrongful convictions. But really, she just got off like on a technicality. You lucked out. You lucked out thanks to a lot of pressure and a lot of political pressure. So I brought up in the beginning, I might just go over that one more time. So let's take this out. And
Recount and iHeartRadio.
Hold on 1 second. That's coming up. This is a show, The Recount, which is a political show, and it's has a lot of Democrat talking heads. Obviously, Jen Palminteri. How did I pronounce that? Palminteri, who was the White House Director of Communications from 2013, 2015. And of course, she worked with Hillary Clinton. So just to remind you how I think, things I think are significant and why the Supreme Court, who really didn't have the jurisdiction or shouldn't have thrown out the DNA evidence, but did, because it's really the only way you can acquit Amanda. But Rudy Goudet's conviction still stood after that, after the Supreme Court, which is so weird to me, threw it out. But I'm sure it has something in Italian law would explain that if I understood it better. But so just to review some of the things we went over in the beginning, Hillary Clinton was offering to meet with anybody who was concerned about Amanda Knox's case. She was meeting with a senator who was advocating for Amanda Knox. And then at the end, we found out that the State Department was monitoring everything that was happening with Amanda Knox being a United States citizen. So just to give you, so here's someone close to Hillary Clinton who worked with her interviewing Amanda Knox about Stillwater and about right around this time about her case. So you can hear all the same kind of stuff. It's pretty interesting. All the interviews Amanda Knox gave around this time I thought were really telling and interesting.
Guest, journalist and activist Amanda Knox. So we're talking about Stillwater, which is the new movie. For those who don't know, it's a new movie of Matt Damon's, director of the film was Tom McCarthy. He is the father of a daughter who is being held abroad for a murder that, and they're telling she was involved with but did not commit.
You're the father of the girl, the American student?
Yes, ma'am.
And Tom McCarthy said he was inspired by your case, but took it was a new direction, a new imagining.
You know, I was pretty fascinated with the Amanda Knox case. It was really just served as inspiration at that point.
But it's actually not a new imagining. It is sort of different circumstances, but the story that they tell is like what you would might refer to as the doppelganger version of your story, right?
Yeah.
The story that's like
the mythology.
The story that the Supreme Court affirmed, that story of multiple attackers, of you washing Meredith Kercher's blood off your hands, that one. So yeah, maybe Tom McCarthy did a deep dive into this case and knows a little bit about it. Silly him. He should have just gone to, Injustice in Perugia, one of Amanda Knox's many pro-Amanda Knox's PR sites. Then he would have gotten the real story. Shame on him for going by the court decisions.
Version of the story. If he were to say like, oh, we're taking the Amanda Knox case as our premise and then we're bringing it into a new direction, what I think he's referring to is the fact that the Amanda Knox father character is going to be investigating and searching for the killer. And sure, that's a new direction. But what's not a new direction is the premise of the Amanda Knox person being involved and at the very least indirectly responsible and also sexually involved with the Meredith Kercher character. And that's where I took.
Well, that's certainly something that has never come out in this case. These two hated each other's guts. So that's certainly a big departure, no? Isn't that enough to make it far enough away from Amanda Knox? I mean, when you do these interviews, Amanda, she's not dumb. She's got to know that when you do these interviews, you're making the association with this movie and yourself even greater. The better thing to do is not say anything, but she just can't help herself. She has to be the center of attention at all times. And then try to virtue signal like she's talking, like she cares about Meredith Kercher's family. Awful. After sort of really just being awful, just saying, oh, I want to go visit Meredith Kercher's grave. And they're calling them basically irrational and they can't see the truth because they're so angry and in grief, criticizing them. Seriously, no matter how many times they tell you not to talk about their daughter, not to visit her grave. And I think Raph came out and said, I secretly visited it. Like, haha, they love to taunt the Kercher family. And then to pretend like you're some kind of advocate for the victim's family is absolutely stomach turning.
issue with the fictionalization of my story, because he didn't fictionalize that at all. He took the fiction that was already in existence that continues to be a burden and a obstacle in my ability to reintegrate successfully into the real world.
The thing that strikes me, I mean, Matt Damon is a male actor who tells stories about men, women.
So the reason you can't successfully reintegrate into the real world is because of Matt Damon in this movie, or the guilters, that are the reason you can't do something else in life, can't get a degree. She was going to school for a while, but of course she quit that again in Seattle. She gives testimony that her way of dealing with the world is through writing. But the only thing that's come out is what many people said was a ghost written memoir. Why don't you do something else, anything else? Even supporters have said that to me. Why doesn't she just go away? Why doesn't she just go somewhere away from the limelight, do something else, contribute to society? Instead, she's doing these, using her fame from Meredith Kercher's murder to raise money for a wedding that she's already been married for over a year. And then she's raising money for some theme wedding for herself and constantly putting herself in the spotlight, making insensitive jokes on Twitter. Just go away, do something else, contribute in another way. How about that, Amanda? There's an idea for you.
Women actors tell stories about women. But what I have to say is particularly galling is, lifts the myth of your story, not to tell the story of a woman like you, but to tell the story of a man.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, I wasn't totally offended by that, because I do think that my dad's experience of my wrongful conviction is an incredibly harrowing experience and a worthwhile one to tell. And I'm honestly...
See, guys, I'm just going to put in that it was a wrongful conviction over and over again. I'm just going to say wrongful conviction over and over again. And maybe it will, like Jedi mind control, maybe I'll convince some of the haters out there, right?
Not surprised that Tom McCarthy and Matt Damon were thinking along those terms, because that is their immediate source of empathy. They're thinking, oh, as the father of someone like that, what would I do? And how would I be even more badass than the real life version?
I'm trying to get my little girl out of jail. That's all I give a damn about.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised that he went out of his way to go to Oklahoma and talk to a bunch of people in Oklahoma to better represent them.
See, it's not all that great a story. My dad went out and hired the premier PR firm in Seattle for $1 million. That's not such an exciting story as Matt Damon running around France, punching people, looking for the real killer. Can you imagine how bad that movie was? I don't even think Stillwater made very much money, did it? I don't think so. I don't think it was a hit.
As characters.
I'm pulling up your tweet about that. The cherry on top of this hashtag Stillwater thing. Damon McCarthy spent time with and developed empathy for, quote, Oklahoma roughnecks, but didn't think to extend that same effort and empathy to the wrongfully vilified woman they use as a plot.
How dare they not have empathy for a formerly convicted killer who got her conviction overturned on a technicality? How dare they not have empathy for Amanda? Unreal. The cherry on top of this Stillwater thing, Damon and McCarthy spent time with and developed empathy. I didn't get to spend time with celebrities for Oklahoma roughnecks, but didn't think to extend the same effort and empathy to the wrongfully, see, she always has to say it, wrongfully vilified woman they used as a plot device. Okay.
Device.
Right. And I think that is ultimately the problem that I have, where it's like, okay, you thought to do all that effort and extend that empathy to the real people that you were going to be representing, knowing that there were going to be potential consequences to that representation. If you don't do it well, they're not going to feel represented. Well,
and that's a good thing to do. It's a good thing that they have done that.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. I think that's a great job. I just wish that courtesy had also been extended to myself, because there is so much judgment that is already a part of that story. The whole premise of the story is one of judgment over the female character. And that not giving me the opportunity to vocalize to them, like, hey, there are consequences to the representation of this female character in this story, is a little bit an oversight on their part, I would say.
There's judgment, and then also it seems from the the way the plot has been written about, like that the daughter is also hiding something, right? There's something suspicious or something about her. She's still right. She's
There's
still
something about her.
Yes. No, so you wrote this great piece in the Atlantic.
Thank you.
It was really well done, really well done. So explain to us this, like the process. You heard about the movie, you wrote this thread, the Atlantic got in touch. How did it all come down? What were you feeling along the way?
Well, I found out about the film because the trailer came out. I just saw the trailer. I saw the very, very clear parallels to my case.
But she's saying in that tweet, does my face belong to me? But your name and your face weren't in that movie, Amanda. I mean, she acts like the character was named Amanda Knox. That's a whole other legal bag of fish. What is she talking about? Does my face belong to me? Does my story? Can someone? It was a news event. Yeah, they're allowed to pull from it, even if they wanted to stick to it and be absolutely pretty close to every detail.
I saw the headline saying this new, Amanda Knox inspired story is coming out. And my first reaction was, well, again, like, okay, here's another one, because this is not the first time this has happened. And, to Tom McCarthy's credit, he was not the person who invented, taking someone else's story and going with it without considering that maybe their consent should or could be a part of the development process of a creative piece. And then I did some investigating to find out how it was that they actually, fictionalized this story. Mm-hmm. And I was disappointed to find that it was not as responsible as I would have hoped, and that it was, in fact...
See, not as responsible means that it comes to a conclusion of guilt. That's why it's not as responsible. Yeah, it broke even. It cost about $20 million and it made 19.8. So it lost money ultimately. Yeah, it wasn't even a success. It was a modest movie to make, and it wasn't even a moneymaker, Amanda. Had you not said anything about it, might have been better for you.
Further entrenching these very, very harmful myths about the case, and for this big, like, someone who has as much resources and reach as Matt Damon and Tom McCarthy to be reiterating that same problematic mythology without consideration of the consequences to me is, I think, an issue that is not just a problem for me. It's an issue that has to go towards who is allowed to tell a story. Right. Why them? And why do they get the resources to tell a story? And should they be asking themselves, well, who has the most at stake when I tell this story? And why am I telling the story the way that I am? And should I consider reaching out to others who could give me insight on how I could tell this story more responsibly? And the way that this story presents it is that, yes, she had special knowledge. Yes, she was the one who incentivized it. And so, yes, she was, even if she didn't mean to and she's technically innocent, she's definitely indirectly responsible for it.
Yeah. Just like the Supreme Court concluded, you were there at the scene of the crime. You washed Meredith Kercher's blood off your hands. Break-in room was staged, and there were multiple attackers, murderers. Yeah. Yeah, you would have a problem with that if the movie concluded that too, and that's completely factual. So what's your issue, Amanda? It's that it wasn't a film that I profited off of, like my book, that glorified me. Me, Amanda Knox.
She instigated it. She instigated the events that led to the murder.
Yeah. And that's the false narrative that is like that's in the ether of people's minds when they think about this case, where it's like,
yes,
I wish that people understood and talked about this case and used the appropriate words to talk about this case that actually represent reality. This is the murder.
See, she wants us to use the appropriate words. The murder of Meredith Kercher. Yet, does she write a book telling it from Meredith's point of view or her point of view? Her point of view, right? I mean, it's her. And then she claims that Meredith has nothing to do with her fame. Does anybody remember that? We can revisit that after this if you want. Unreal. It had nothing to do. This murder had nothing to do with how she got famous and rich. She didn't profit off this in any way. Right, Amanda. So she's going to tell us the proper words. And that's very much like this movement. So the teen killer movement, the movement to get rid of life without parole for juveniles, will use the term justice-involved youth for convicted teen murderers. They'll say wrongfully accused. They'll never say wrongfully convicted. They have their own language. Minimizing language, finessing it. And Amanda wants you to use the proper language, meaning the language of what I'd call innocence fraud. But she's going to start with Meredith first because, of course, she's Meredith's biggest advocate now.
Of Meredith Kercher by Rudy Gaudet. And Amanda Knox has nothing to do with that.
I would think they would.
See, the most important thing is that Rudy Gaudet did this alone. It doesn't matter that the Supreme Court didn't affirm that, said it was multiple people, that he had accomplices. Doesn't matter. I'd like people to be more factual with my view of reality, my warped view. I'd like them to say Amanda Knox had nothing to do with it. Then I'll be happy. Then I don't mind how my face is used or my image or how I'm portrayed. Just as long as you say I'm innocent.
At least be concerned about what your reaction might be. Right? Like, it's just like, I was like, even if you're just trying to protect yourselves, would you not reach out to Amanda Knox in 2021 America?
Well, and that's the major reason why I decided to speak up about it, because I genuinely do not think that Tom McCarthy and Matt Damon had bad intentions. But one, their sort of assumption about what the case was even about was false, that it's not the story of a American girl involved in a crime, but one in which she was accused of being involved, but not actually being involved. And also there's the issue of, like...
So now her issue isn't that it's not Meredith focused, it's just that they didn't come to the right conclusion. So see-through. So see-through, these formerly convicted murderers. So see-through.
If they had reached out to me to ask me how I felt about the way that they were portraying me, they would have learned a lot. And I think that the problem is that in most people's minds, I'm considered a character. I am the case, and people's idea of me, they've seen in the context of it being a story, a plot device, as something in the zeitgeist that is.
Wait, you're a character? So she's even bigger, guys. Is she an archetype now? She's a plot device. She's a character. She's bigger than life now. But it's not connected to who she really is as a person. And had Matt Damon and the director, McCarthy, come to her, Professor Amanda could have taught them a lot. She's a lot to teach, guys. A lot of important knowledge to share about her multifaceted, complex personality. I'll never forget when I temped for Puff Daddy for like, I don't know, must have been maybe a couple weeks. And I found his bio in the thing. It was like, it started out like, to fully understand I don't know what he was called. I think he was called Puff Daddy at that point. Puff Daddy's complex Scorpio personality. So to fully understand Amanda Knox's complex, what is she? Cancer personality, to fully understand it. She'll explain it all to you, Professor Amanda.
Is that we can point to, that people recognize, but they forget that there's a human being behind it. What they've done is they've said, okay, my audience is going to recognize this story and they're going to recognize this character. They're thinking about their audience. They're not thinking about the human being who is the source material of that character. And why is that? Well, they're not in a position where they're forced to have to consider that. In the same way that we're finally having some sense of accountability for the way that certain characters are portrayed in these stories, and acknowledging that in the past, when we have told the stories of people who are in underprivileged positions, who are not being empowered to write their own narratives and be the authors of their own experiences, we've made mistakes. We've overlooked people's humanity in a big way, and it's come at the expense of great groups of people. We have yet to sort of have that same, to recognize that same thing is happening on an individual level as well, when those individuals have become, once again, stereotypes in the ether and, touchstones in the zeitgeist, but are not recognized as human beings who have.
So does this thing, I think the sound just went out. So is she saying she's an underrepresented person because she was wrongfully convicted? Other people are writing her story, right? I don't even understand. So she's the only one that can write her story? And she's comparing herself to marginalized people? She of the $1 million PR, she had $1 million PR campaign behind her. And now she's like poor and underrepresented. Give me a break.
Have perspective and can be the authors of their own experience if only we would empower them to do that.
Thanks for watching. You can watch the full episode of Just Something About Her.
Oh, no thanks. No thanks. I got enough with that. That was enough. But yeah, it just reminded me so much of Amanda Knox talking about Meredith Kercher, and I think where it is, let's just watch that again, shall we? We have a little time, right? Let me see if I can get that, where she talks about how she wouldn't be famous she would still be famous if she hadn't been, according to her, falsely accused of this murder, or falsely convicted, right? Twice. That had nothing to do with her. Hold on, let me see if I can find this. Anybody remember this video?
Now, you've got these two evil creatures here, the fox and the cat.
Be like, hi, I'm Amanda Knox. You ready to talk to me yet? So
these ne'er-do-well characters, the fox in particular. Now, a fox is a standard trickster animal, right? It's a classic animal, maybe because it's good at hiding and it's good at hunting.
21, she's the advocate for Meredith Kercher and the Kercher family. Give me a break. It gets worse too as this goes on.
Fox is bragging away about some crooked thing that he's done and how he pulled the wool over someone's eyes, and he confuses that with wisdom and intelligence. And
Things okay, this is a normal day, and it wasn't. And that turned into this interesting relationship with the police, who, like, they came into this situation with a crime scene and a body and a terrible bloody mess. And so they immediately started casting about for worst case scenarios, looking about at us as
and you and Raphael came on this.
One of the things that you see, this is worth knowing too, because if you're preyed upon by a
So she came on the scene and there was a body, not her good friend Meredith, right? And there was a mess. And like I've said before, what do you do with messes? You clean them up. Very interesting language, Amanda. Very interesting.
psychopath, which you will be to some degree at some point in your life. The psychopath who will be narcissistic will presume that you're stupid and that you deserve to be taken advantage of because you're naive and stupid. So it's actually a good thing that he's doing it. And his proof for, and I'm saying he because there are more male psychopaths, the proof that you're stupid, naive, is that he can take advantage of you. And so, like, if you were wiser, you'd be, you know, you'd know his tricks, and then it wouldn't be morally necessary for him to show you just exactly who knows what about what. And so the psychopath will use his ability to fool you as proof of his own grandiose omnipotence, omniscience, and narcissism. And the problem with that is that you can be fooled by a psychopath, and virtually anybody can.
The thing about this story is the media decided, especially the tabloid media, decided to really strip me of context.
So that Robert Hare, for example, who studied psychopaths for a long time and interviewed a lot of them, like hundreds of them, and videotaped many of the interviews, he said when he was talking to the psychopath, he always believed what they were saying. And then he'd watch the video afterwards and see where the conversation went off the rails. But
to not show, you know, the hours of time that I was there helping the police, they just...
You know, the proclivity to be polite in a conversation is very strong. And if you're polite, you don't object to the way that the person unfolds their strategy, you know.
You know, like, I was there and I was doing truly what I thought was going to help. I was doing my best, and I had no idea that the police had their own confirmation bias.
See, she was doing her best, just falsely accusing Patrick Lumumba, letting him sit in prison for 2 weeks, not saying anything to anybody, just letting an innocent man linger. And it makes it so hilarious that now she's supposed to be the face of wrongful convictions, the woman who falsely accused her boss of murder and let him sit in prison. He had to get himself out with his own alibi. But she told her mom she felt bad. She didn't do anything about feeling bad when she knew it was untrue. She just let him sit, met with her lawyers. But she was stripped of her context. She lost her context. What a horrible thing. I mean, Meredith Kercher lost her life, but she lost her context.
Being brought into the equation. They were looking for a murderer. They were looking for a monster. And so their glasses were tinted.
And psychopaths are pretty good at figuring out how to manipulate, obviously, how to manipulate people. And the probability that you will be immune to that is extraordinarily low.
In the 5 days from discovering Meredith's death and my arrest, I was interrogated for 53 hours. And
Go watch Paul Bernardo being interviewed by policemen on YouTube. That's bloody, that's enlightening, man. Paul Bernardo, he's like the CEO of a meeting in that video, you know. He gives the cops hell, he gives the lawyers hell, he protests his innocence. He basically tells them that they're rude and untrustworthy because they don't trust him because he did a few little things 17 years ago. And he gets away with it, a few little things, right? I mean, he killed a bunch of people, including the sister of his girlfriend at the time, and, you know, he was a repeat sexual offender and murderer. It's like, but he basically goes, well, you know, that's a long time ago. It's like, we're past that, aren't we? I mean, I'm having a discussion with you. I'm trying to help you solve some crimes, which, by the way, I committed, but we won't bring that up. You know, and you're accusing me of being a liar. Like, you're not playing fair. What's up with you?
I think about her most of all when I think about her family. I've never really had the chance to ever meet her family, and the conditions of their coming into contact with me ever were always through the courtroom.
Like, hi, I'm Amanda Knox. You ready to talk to me yet?
I want to see Meredith's grave. I want to be there, and I want to actually be able to say goodbye to her.
Patrick Lumumba's nightclub went under. He sued Knox for slander and was awarded roughly $50,000. She's appealing and has not paid him any money.
Her family overnight released a statement, and they said they're not going to read the book, that they are waiting to be heard, and that their beloved Meredith is the victim. What do you say to the Kircher family this morning, Amanda?
Like, hi, I'm Amanda Knox. You ready to talk to me yet?
I still hope they'll read my book, because in it I talk about Meredith. I talk about the relationship I had with her. And that is the little amount that I can give them of her. But I also want them to be able to come away with my perspective, because if they're seeking answers, and they deserve to have answers, and I give it as every answer that I can in my book. It's the first way that I can reach out to them, and I really hope that we can connect one day.
I know you would try.
Out of this situation, I have gained financially in the telling of my story, and that has nothing to do with Meredith. Do you think it's disrespectful yourself to Meredith's memory, Meredith's family? When I first saw them, it was in court, and I saw from their faces that they thought I was the one who killed their daughter. I would hope that they wouldn't have those faces now. But even if they did, I'd ask them.
Like, hi, I'm Amanda Knox. You ready to talk to me yet?
To give me a chance for them to understand that I'm not the person who the prosecution says I am. I'm not the person who their lawyer says I am. That I care about Meredith. I care about justice for her. How do you feel that potentially the Kircher family may always think that you had something to do with the death of their daughter? I hope that's not the case. It takes away the possibility of there being healing for them and for me, because I won't visit her grave unless they give me permission to. And I want the part of her that was alive to be more defining in my life. And the part of her that remains is her family.
Like, hi, I'm Amanda Knox. You ready to talk to me yet?
You and how difficult it's been for you, but clearly for Meredith's family this has been an absolute nightmare. You have said that you would like to meet them, you would like to pay your respects at Meredith's grave. They've said no. How do you feel about that? Where do you stand now?
I can understand where they're coming from, and this has been the major obstacle for me reaching out to them, because I know that they think that I had some sort of involvement with Meredith's death, and I want them I would hope that they would eventually take into consideration even the possibility of my innocence. They need to understand that the prosecution is simply wrong, and that their lawyers are...
See, guys, the prosecution is wrong. The Supreme Court is wrong. Everybody, I just wish they'd listen to me, Amanda Knox. Sure, I've been stripped of my context, but the Kircher family shouldn't be listening to like the court decisions, shouldn't believe what they've seen in court. We can talk about her incredible testimony, her crazy testimony. She didn't do well, is all I have to say on the stand. But I just want to show just a little bit about how she taunted and criticized the Kircher family. And then 2021 rolls around, and now she's the Kircher spokesperson. Give me a break.
Wrong, and that is so hard, that you want to trust the system, you want to trust that the answers that were given to you are the answers that are true. And I understand that it's very difficult. I understand that it's hard to be logical about this, but I also want them to understand that Meredith really was my friend. She was very kind to me, and I had nothing to do with her murder. And I am truly innocent, and I truly believe that the only way that any of us are going to be able to heal from all of this is if we come together and acknowledge the pain that we have all gone through.
Just a question. How would not thinking Amanda Knox was involved would help the Kircher family heal? I understand that now both Meredith's parents have passed, but at the time that they were living, how would not thinking Amanda Knox was involved, how would that help them heal? Or would it just benefit Amanda? All right, just a little bit more of this. And
I've read John Kircher's book. I've done everything that I could to hear what they had to say in the few times that they had opened themselves up to the outside world about their grief. I have not been able to have the kind of contact with them and to be able to confront closure as far as grieving for Meredith's death, and that's what I've envisioned would be.
That's so great to be able to confront. No, I mean, to be able to have closure and grieve, to be able to confront the people who've spoken out. And they were so classy. I mean, we can go over some of the Kircher's press conferences, maybe in another episode, but they really were so classy and so restrained and so strong throughout this. I don't know how they did it. Truly miraculous. Because I don't know, this, you know, listening to Amanda Knox make herself the victim, nothing more stomach turning, for sure. But I think that's what I have for today. I think that's it. I think I'll save her testimony maybe for another day. She didn't do well. She was asked about all the same things that she's asked about in interviews. But actually, you know, I wish more interviewers would ask her about Patrick Lumumba and why she accused him of this murder and why she let him sit while she's telling her mom, oh yeah, I know, I'm not confused. I know he's innocent. I know he had nothing to do with this. Why tell your lawyer or why tell the prosecutor that? No, just tell your mom. Just tell someone who can't do really anything about it. So incredible, this whole story. And the fact that she still has supporters out there willing to hold water for this psychopath. Really deranged and dangerous person, in my opinion. Is beyond me. But that is the power of an innocence fraud campaign, in my opinion. All right. Have a great day, guys. I will see you back here sometime soon. All right. Have a good one.